Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do with the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, and welcome to another podcast from Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. I still chuckle about that title. I still get people that really like it and people that really don't like it. What I want to look at today is something that, and when I call this trauma for everybody is different. So trauma doesn't have to be a major collapse of your world. Depending on your age, depends on how you would perceive trauma. Yeah, if you look at a 2-year-old, then losing their comfort blanket, for example, would be traumatic. Now, from an adult's perspective, it's a blanket. I'll buy you a new one, you know. From a child's perspective, they've invested a lot themselves in that blanket. It smells similar or specific to whatever environment they're in or what they do. So they're picking up on that as a comfort item, a security blanket. But from an adult's perspective, well, it's not trauma. But from a 2-year-old, it could be the end of their world. And if anybody's got children, then you kind of will get that. They'll have a favourite toy or a favourite thing or, something that connects them to their world. As we grow up, as we get older, we realise that things usually aren't forever, a lot of stuff. And so we get used to losing things and finding things and those kind of aspects. Which is why it's not traumatic from an adult's perspective, because they can't remember when they were 2-year-old, basically. So when we go through scenarios in our lives, and they are traumatic to us, then those things, dependent on what we are able to do with it, will naturally become significant times. What we can do is we can go through life with different traumatic events that might have a similar feel or a similar system, similar aspect, similar feeling, similar emotion. Then they can build up and build up and build up because they've got that similarity. So they build up and build up and build up to become much bigger. So we can have a fear of rejection, for example, where we kind of like are really scared of saying something to somebody just in case they leave us. But that kind of builds up over a period of time usually. It's not usually a one-off occurrence. So if we're looking at the really serious aspect of trauma and we're looking to abuse or in some way, shape or form, then that abuse has a similar feeling, a similar process. The abuse can be in different ways, in different situations, scenarios, but it will have a similarity in the feel of it, the feeling that goes with it, or the aspect of it. So when we go through those traumas, what we say in therapy and in counselling process is that we split. So our physical body experiences the trauma, whatever that will be. Our emotional body splits and goes into sometimes imagination, sometimes creativity, sometimes areas where we don't physically have to feel. That splitting, when we go through that, it becomes easier not to experience the pain, the suffering, if we go into those worlds with our emotional body, our emotional sense. Now, when we get older, whatever older is, then those things can recreate triggers I've talked about before on these podcasts with abuse. Sometimes it disconnects us completely. So we don't feel, we don't have those emotional drives anymore. We keep ourselves safe. We might not connect with relationships. When we see people in the counselling room, this splitting process, then we need to try and reconnect those two parts. We need to reconnect the emotional body with the physical body. Now, that might appear in the counselling room in all sorts of different ways, which I won't go through. But that process of splitting, we need to find a way of reconnecting, of bringing those two parts of ourselves together so that we can be a whole person. And we can react in the moment. We can kind of take more control of our world and our life. We can reconnect with people. We can find an emotional connection with another human being. All those kind of things. So there's a process that I use, which wasn't mine. I've not created this. It was first given to me, and I don't suppose that was the first person who used it, by a lady, Penny Parks, who no longer is with us. And she did a lot of inner child work. And that process of reconnecting is a part of the work she used to do. So what I do with the clients, the person in front of me, when we get to a suitable point, not straight away, when they're able to hold that idea of this splitting notion and see how that interacts with their world. So it's not exactly the first thing we talk about. We naturally talk about the process of their world and their life and their situation scenarios. And it might not be appropriate for every client that comes to me. So it is a conversation I have with a client. It's a process of reconnection, process of bringing those two parts together. But done at the right time with the client involved in the process and the conversation. So we try to reconnect in a specific way. And the way I do that is I ask the client if they would write a letter to that younger person. Now, it doesn't have to be when they were a child. They could have had trauma when they were mid-20s, mid-30s. But it will be the younger person of whatever traumatic event was occurring. And I ask them to write a letter to that younger person and how they see that younger person, what they feel about that younger person. And that letter can be a very emotional process, which is why we do need the client to be aware of this and them to make that choice and decision. So you're writing as you saw that younger person within that traumatic period. Once that letter's been done, I then ask them to write another letter, dependent on the person, depends on how much time elapses between both letters. I then ask that person to write from that younger person's perspective to the person they are now and how they feel about them, how they see them, whether or not they like who they are now, what's going on in their world and their life. So they're writing a letter from that younger person to the person in front of me, the person they see. Now that can be a very emotional letter as well, sometimes, because maybe we haven't become the person we would have liked to have become. Maybe we haven't gone through life and achieved all the things we wanted to be. That process helps them to engage with the here and now, the person they are, the reality of the situation as they see it. Once that letter's been done, which I say can be an emotional letter as well, I then ask them to write a third letter. And that letter is from the younger person to the person they'd like themselves to be in the future. That can be an emotional process, but more usual, it's a positive process. It gives them a feeling of empowerment. It gives them a feeling of choice. It gives them a feeling of change, something they can be if they choose to be. And how they see that person in the future, what they would like their world to look like, and what they would like the aspects of their world to be. So that might be a different career, it might be a different relationship, it might be a different aspect of themselves. They might want to see themselves as a striving, confident person, whatever that is. But it's usually a positive letter. It can have some emotion in it, obviously, because we are emotional beings, but it's more of a positive and more of a process, a journey to where they want to become. In some senses, what I'm doing is I'm doing past, present, future. So we're engaging with the past, person in front of me to the younger self. We're engaging with present, younger self to the person they are now. And we're engaging with future, younger person to the person they want to be. And that process in that way can create a really good tool of releasing that aspect of trauma, finding that reconnection with their emotional self in the here and now, today, and also then doing some aspect of where do they want to go in their lives? What do they want their world to look like? So that past, present, future process helps to engage with this aspect of bringing those two parts back together, the emotional and the physical. That might create a process for them of expansion. It might create a process of them of making major changes in their world and their life, because where they are now today in front of me to the future sense is a journey, and it may have to have some endings, some changes, some moving forward. If you're not happy with who you are today, chances are the relationships around you won't be getting the best of you. Because if you're not happy with who you are, pretty much the people around you aren't going to get that happy person either. They're going to get a different person. Moving forward to be the happiest you can be, there is no perfect, as I've said on previous podcasts, but as good as you can get it, everybody around you is going to get that new person, that happier, more comfortable, more connected person, being the best person they can be. And they, the people around you, are going to benefit as much as you, because they're getting that good part of you, that as good as it can get part of you. A lot happier, a lot more confident, a lot more secure, a lot more connected, whatever those things are. And you can grow into that person. It's not going to happen overnight. Nothing ever does. But it's going to give you a possible journey, a possible future, possible aspects of you being you, whatever that is. But in order to get that new you, you might have to make some major changes in the world and life. And that's not always easy. Sometimes in this process, when we've done that third letter to the you want to be, a lot of people don't take that journey. And I get that. Not a journey I have to make you take as a client. It's a journey you should want to take. But sometimes we don't take that journey because of how it will affect other people, how it will change their world and their lives, how that disconnection process or changes will make their world insecure. A lot of people who've been through trauma when they were younger tend to work to somebody else's needs and requirements. They tend to see that process of achieving fulfillment in other people rather than fulfillment in themselves. They kind of get fulfillment by helping other people sometimes. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it won't necessarily make them truly them, whatever that is. And sometimes that's why people don't make that next step into that third letter process, because they feel uncomfortable in how it's going to change other people's lives. Or it might be scary because I'm going to have to end this relationship to get to that next step. And that new, that different, that future isn't told, it isn't written. It's something that I don't know how it's going to go. May not get there. And so sometimes it's easier to stay with what I know and then to move forward into what I don't know. And that's scary for a lot of people. Anything that we don't know, anything that we can't solidly put our foot on, our growth, our development, sometimes it's easier to stay with the us we know than the us we could become. And I get that. Totally understand that. I've had times in my world, in my life, where that unknown is scary, is very scary. But I can only say that as I've moved forward into that new me, whatever that new me is, it's been scary, but it's also been very fulfilled. And I'm constantly moving and changing, as we all are. So I'm never get there because there's then another us. Like the first time I did a podcast, which is kind of like a year and 2 months ago. It was a scary world to be in this studio, to be with these cameras, to be with this microphone, to be talking to, I don't know who's on the other end of this camera, and to give pieces of my experience, my world, my life, that might or might not be helpful. And it was a scary process, but it made me challenge some of the things I didn't think I can do because I wasn't comfortable in front of a camera. I'm comfortable in audiences with people in front of me, but I wasn't like that at one time. I had to step through that fear, that scary process to be the person I am now. And that's constantly changing and will constantly change. But I look forward to that change now. There is a bit of me that's still scared about it, future. But things happen. Life happens. And I don't think there's anything that's a coincidence. I think everything is as it should be going forward. Fear of the unknown. But I'm less fearful of it now. I'm much more in tune with it, much more accepting of it. I don't necessarily see it as a don't do it. I see it as a, yeah, it's going to be scary. Well, let's move forward. Just the same as the first podcast I did. But now I've done it. I have no fear of being in this room. I have no fear of being in front of this camera. I have no fear of all the technology and stuff that the people behind the scenes are doing. Cheers, Sam and James. And I can do it. I've taught myself I can do this. Yes, I still need help. Obviously, I don't have all the skills and abilities I need to do it. But I don't get hung up about that. I don't worry about that. I just find somewhere to get those skills from, get people to do that work with me, and move forward. The unknown is scary, yes, but it's not immobilizing. It doesn't stop me. It sometimes gives me more encouragement to go forward, to see what this future is going to be like. How is it going to be like? And to move forward and to go forward with that. So if you can do that 3-letter step process, it will be difficult. It will. This is not an easy process to do. And I have done this process myself. I always use experiences, tools that I've used. I think certainly if there's any therapists watching or counsellors, you should always try the stuff out on yourself. Don't ever give it to a client without you looking at it, working with it, experiencing it, because you'll know the pitfalls. You'll know what may or may not be easier to work with or what may or may not be helpful. But I only know that from my point of view, it's helped me and it's given me a different focus in my world and my life, really. And that has got to be a good thing. And I'm becoming more me, whatever that looks like. And I don't know if I'll ever get there. I don't know if we ever do get there fully. But it's a very interesting journey. Scary, but interesting. If anybody on the other end of this camera, this lens, this podcast, has been through that process, try it. See if it works for you. Can't do anything bad, okay? It will be an emotional journey, the 3 letters. It won't be an easy journey. But everything that we've done in the past, everything that's happened to us in the past affects us in the present. I'm a great believer in that. And I think the more in charge of the past I am, the more I understand the past, the more in control and in charge of my world and my life I am. And the more decisions I'll make based on me, not on anything else. Which is going to be a good thing. Don't you think? If ever you want to give me any comments about the podcast, please just drop me a line, drop me an email through the channels that you've found me on. And I will add to this library of podcasts with the experiences and interesting things you send me, of which I do. Or I'll just reply and share that load with you. My name's Ian Wallace. You take care, enjoy and share. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon. And it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button. And if you've got any comments, please give me them and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.